Welcome to The Third Story. I'm your host, Leo Sidran. The end of the year is fast approaching, and there's a backlog of interviews from 2019 that still have not been released. The good news is that if they don't make it out this year, it's okay. These conversations are designed to be somewhat timeless, so ideally it shouldn't matter when they come to you. Sometimes the conversations are scheduled around an event, a release, a product, whatever, but more often they're the result of some personal experience, something that motivates me to reach out to the guest and invite them to tell me their story. I just got back from over a month on tour in Europe, playing drums in jazz clubs with my dad. We played in France and England and Spain. Spent a lot of time in Spain. And in Belgium, too. The Belgians, I have learned, are very proud of their long legacy of supporting American jazz. We played a cool little club in Brussels for a couple of nights and then did a lovely Sunday matinee show in a little Belgian town called Heist-Optenberg in a club called the Hanita. This is one of these classic European jazz scenes, out in the countryside, somewhat rural scenario, beautiful, bucolic. Hanita was started in the 1950s by a guy named Joao Gilberto. He was a jazz lover who started to book shows in his town, eventually moving his venue out into a farmhouse. And over the years, he booked Chet Baker, Art Blakey, Bill Evans, Gil Evans, Dexter Gordon, Freddie Hubbard, Abdullah Ibrahim, Keith Jarrett, Thad Jones and Mel Lewis, Charles Mingus, Hank Mobley, Horace Silver, Clark Terry. You know, just an incredible list of great artists. And Joao saved all his correspondence, all the posters, all the various materials associated with his booking these shows. And he also saved private recordings that he made of the concerts. Today, this club is run by Joel's son, Peter, who invited us to visit their archive before the show. While this was clearly an exceptional place, the fact is that throughout the last 100 years, all over the world, there have been people who supported, collected, and traded their own private collections of jazz memorabilia and jazz recordings. Sometimes they're referred to as trench coat tape collectors, a whole subset of the jazz world, some of whom I have come across in my travels. I picture a bearded, white-haired older gentleman, a bit stocky, sucking on a small cigarillo with a floor-length trench coat, maybe some kind of hat, and a deep desire to tell you about all the concerts he's seen. So we drove from Brussels out into the Flemish country on a brisk Sunday afternoon and met Peter outside what he refers to as the parsonage. It's actually an old priest's home, which now houses the extensive Nita archive. And walking from room to room through stacks of hundreds of tapes, spanning decades, the first thing I could think to ask was, do you know Zev Feldman? Zev is a record producer. He got his start in the jazz business as a young man in his early 20s, and he came up through the ranks of sales, merchandising, marketing, distribution, all of the pieces of the business as it existed at the end of the last century. And over time, he came to settle in comfortably in an area of the jazzosphere that focuses on locating, unearthing, and releasing previously unknown recordings. Some people know him simply as the Jazz Detective. Variety magazine called him possibly the most widely admired archival producer working in the jazz field today. Downbeat refers to him as the Jazz Sleuth, and perhaps most famously, Stereophile magazine called him the Indiana Jones of jazz. In the last 10 years, working with almost every major jazz label and many small independent labels, and primarily with Resonance Records, Zev has shepherded the release of previously unknown recordings by the likes of Wes Montgomery, Bill Evans, Thelonious Monk, Eric Dolphy, John Coltrane, Joao Gilberto and Stan Getz, and many more, including my father. That's actually how I met Zev, when he helped curate a box set of previously unreleased recordings by my dad, spanning 40 years and recorded around the world. And what I felt from Zev when I worked with him on that project was how gentle, respectful, and enthusiastic he was in the process. And it gave me a sense of how he manages to persuade the estates of so many legendary artists to consent to these releases. You know, it's a fine line that he has to walk sometimes. And my mind is not totally made up, to be honest with you, about what it means. Sometimes I think there are reasons why records weren't released, why these tapes haven't seen the light of day. And other times I think it's a real gift to the community, to the jazz world, to unearth these tapes and bring them into the light. And we talk about that in this conversation. This is a chat that we had sometime in late spring of this year, and I've been waiting for the right time to share it. And when I walked into that Flemish parsonage last month, I realized, in the words of the great Charlie Parker, now's the time. In our conversation, it's clear that as big of a fan of jazz as Zev is, he's also in love with the business. It was a good fit for him, and he goes out of his way time and time again to call out the names of those who lifted him up, gave him the opportunity, brought him into the fold. And he sees, I think, his place in the business as part of a long legacy in the same way that musicians might see themselves as part of a legacy. Third-story.com is the place to go for all your Third Story podcast needs. Sign up, subscribe, say hello, check out the episode index of past conversations, including those with other jazz producers of various stars and stripes, including Matt Pearson, Tommy LaPuma, Al Schmidt, Creed Taylor, and many more. And if you feel so in your mind to, after having spent some time at third-story.com, you can click the button to the Patreon page, patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast. That's where you can get involved in a deeper level. And if you do, from time to time, some bonus material will be made available to you. And today is no exception. Today, there's a 15, maybe almost 20-minute excerpt from our conversation that deals with the nuts and bolts of Zev Feldman's career path in the record business. In his telling, it's very interesting for those curious about the architectural underpinnings of the jazz business, but it's a bit granular. So I made it a bonus for those of you who want to get in there and get your hands dirty and find out what does it mean to start in the mailroom, start as an intern, start at the bottom and work your way up all the way to the top of the downbeat critics poll for jazz producer in 2019. Because that's where Zev found himself. Well, almost at the top. He was voted the number 2 jazz producer of the year in the Downbeat Critics poll this year, just behind Manfred Eicher of ECM Records. So, Zev's climb, his ascent, is a rather impressive one. And he's a sweet guy. He's a menschy guy. You'll hear it in the conversation. I have to remind you, as I have been recently, if you're digging what I'm putting down, subscribe. Subscribe on your podcast app so that the next time an episode comes out, which will be not long from now, I assure you, it'll just show up. It'll be provided automatically to you. And when I lay it down, whap, it'll stay laid down. Here's my conversation with Zev Feldman. Tell me, tell me why people call you the Indiana Jones of jazz. Just tell me why you would have earned that title.
Because I literally searched the world for previously unissued recordings of this genre of music that is commonly known as jazz, America's classical music, and it's a passion of mine. But I spent a great deal of time searching for archives, musicians, individuals who may possess recordings, trying to find recordings that are maybe rumored to exist. That's kind of fun too. But it's it's been an amazing time for me, especially over the last 18 months. But even before that, the last 10 years have been extraordinary. In 2016, Leo, I produced 26 albums in 1 year as a producer, and that was these new discoveries. There was actually a reissue series in there where we excavated and saved a good chunk of the Xanadu Records catalog that was created by producer Don Schlitten. We had to rescue these tapes that were submerged in water and bring them out to the market. So, but anyways, I love what I do. I love this music. It runs in my lifeblood, in my family. There are many musicians in my family. It's just been a big part of me and who I am. And George Claben at Resonance Records afforded me the opportunity to really explore being a producer. It was something that I never had done before. I had aspired with great ambition to try to do creative projects on the recording side. But George was a guy that said to me one day back in 2009, Zev, he was struggling to understand how I hadn't been doing producing, because it seems my whole life I've been collecting music and records and reading and studying, and it's just this fascination and hobby of mine. It's literally the center of my universe. So he said, I'll make you a deal. If you can go out and you can find recordings that have never been out before, I'm not talking reissues, I'm talking about new discoveries. I'll tell you what, if I like the music, you can produce it for me. And I tell people often it was Fire on Gasoline. It was oh my gosh, all of a sudden I found myself calling musicians' families and archives and explaining what I was doing. And it wasn't so easy in the beginning. Folks didn't know who we were. But there's one gentleman who had a relationship with my boss, George Claben, going back to the mid-'60s, and that's the great Michael Cascuna.
Mm-hmm.
Most folks know from Mosaic Records, Blue Note Records, Blue Thumb, where he worked with your father.
Mm-hmm.
And he, to me, is one of my heroes in this music, a tremendous inspiration. And they had a relationship going back to the 60s. Because when Michael was in high school, he used to call George on his radio program at WKCR here in New York, and he would win all the contests. So they knew each other. And when I realized that, I was calling Michael more frequently, and he's someone that I can proudly say is a mentor and a friend and someone that I just look up to. He is provides great inspiration to me.
Well, it's not such a surprise because he really laid the groundwork for the kind of work that you do. He was an archivist. I think he went through and resurrected tapes and found outtakes and spent months and years in the vaults at Blue Note and at Prestige. And, his name appeared on all of those CD reissues. But, I mean, you must have thought of, when you knew what he did, understanding that that's a role in the business, that there's a place for people like you that somebody's got to fill. And like you, Cascuna really worked for everybody and belonged to nobody, or belonged to everybody, kind of at the same time was his own free agent. And that's what I'm trying to place. I'm trying to figure out where you fit in it, because it seems like you're working on a lot of things and for a lot of people at the same time.
I am. I'm really pursuing projects that get me excited, ones that I know that I can really devote my passion to. I think passion's a big part of it.
So let's talk about what it means to find some tape, some recording that you maybe didn't know existed or heard existed. I mean, what is the process of finding something? What do you have to do to find and ultimately release these tapes? Like, for example, you came in today and you handed me this Bill Evans in England LP, which I've been reading a lot about, and it got a lot of press this year. And it's an exciting thing for a lot of people, particularly Bill Evans fans. What's the process of finding that and putting it out?
Well, it happens in a variety of different ways. I could meet someone somewhere. There are a lot of people. I get contacted out of the blue by complete strangers. That's, in fact, how this Evans in England project came together, because in 2016, I was contacted by a gentleman who I didn't know before, who lived in Strasbourg, France, and he wrote to me, says, well, I've got several hours of previously unissued Bill Evans recordings. Would you be interested? And he had become familiar with our label and with me because of the work that we had done prior. And I like to describe this gentleman, I say humorously in my liner notes, is I had this friend at Concord who also has been in the business a long time. Her name is Cheryl Pavelski, and she had this term, and I just loved when she would refer to people and sometimes content provider as these trench coat tape collectors. Mm-hmm. And these can be folks in any walk of life. And in the case of Evans in England, it came to me from a private collector, someone that was in the circle who had access, and this happens all the time.
So these are guys who back in the day would show up at a concert or somewhere, or would tape it off the radio or whatever it was. They would make their own archives.
Or they would trade it amongst other collectors, and that's what happens sometimes. And these folks are from all walks of life, and God bless them. It's because of them sometimes we find these recordings. But if you had to ask me about what was the one, what epitomizes this whole process, in 2014, George Claben at Resonance sent me to Bremen, Germany to go to the Jazz Ahead conference. Mm-hmm. And while I was there...
And this is a conference where the European jazz business is basically meeting once a year.
It's really become more of an international conference. You have a convergence of artists, booking agents, distributors, journalists. And if you're in the music business and work on in the global marketplace, it's become very important. And something really profound happened in 2014. I met the family from MPS Records, a record company that I've been collecting for so long. I had met with one of the sons of the owner of the company, And I was just having a conversation, speaking very naturally, again, using my passion just to describe how much I loved this company, how great it was to meet. And I remember I said to Matthias Bruno Schwier, I said, so I have a question. I ask a lot of people this. So, and I looked him right dead in the eyes. I said, do you have any unissued tapes? And he looks back at me. He looks over both shoulders, and he says, can you keep a secret? I said, sure. He said, we have a Bill Evans studio recording from 1968. And I think I nearly almost fell over. I couldn't believe it. But this was the reason why George sent me all the way to Germany. And over the next year, we negotiated with the family for this tape.
So this is an album that was made that their contract was signed, Bill Evans, and the guys got paid for the session?
They got paid for it, but what's so interesting is where they never had negotiated a deal for its release. Hans-Georg Bruno Schwier was an independently wealthy man, and for fun, he brought them and invited them to record this session just to record it. They didn't have any rights to do anything, and might I add, Bill Evans was under an exclusive recording contract in 1968 with Verve MGM, so that wasn't going to come out, or at least at that time, and for whatever reason, it wasn't pursued, so the tape sat there. And there's some different speculation as to why that occurred, but when we listened to the recordings, I'll never forget, it took me out to the parking lot outside the trade hall, and we sat in their car, and I listened to this recording, and it was just extraordinary what I was hearing, and it was really setting me off on a great adventure. And that album, in the first 9 months to a year, sold 60,000 copies, which is unheard of for a jazz recording, historical recording. It also showed me the power that this music has. Bill Evans resonates throughout the world. He's a genius in his music. He continues to inspire people. And we were able to put this out with the support of the family, with negotiated copyrights that were obtained by the rights holders. And it was just a joyous experience. And it's still selling this project. People still talk about it.
You have to go to the Bill Evans estate as well.
Yes, absolutely. Nothing happens without the family. It really all starts and stops there. I had a deal in place for these tapes, but I knew, quite frankly, if the family wasn't going to go for it, it was stuck.
Yeah, or there's just negative karma attached to it. I mean, that's my concern is that, and I wonder if you've had any of these before, where you have a tape that you know is great and there might be real interest in the world for it, but you have somebody in the estate that isn't so keen on getting the thing out there. Has that happened to you before?
It happens sometimes. I'm actually experiencing a situation with that where I've been trying to clear some recordings that I won't get into.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it all starts and stops with the families or whoever has that letter of, the power of attorney, whatever controls the estate. Without them, it's dead.
Part of the job is following up on these mysterious recordings that you don't know if they exist or not, right? Like, is it anything beyond making the phone call? I mean, do you have to get in somebody's ear? Do you have to establish trust with people in order to find out what's there and what they're willing to tell you about?
Oftentimes, I would say relationships are turnkey for all of this. If folks don't want to work with you, they don't have to engage with you, and that sometimes happens too. The relationships are everything, and that's why I really value these individuals I meet all the time, and not to mention we always seem to have things in common. We're passionate music people at the end of the day. We're cut from the same cloth, or at least that's why I've been making a lot of friends, I guess, over the last several years. I'm really grateful for that.
What would be the holy grail for the Indiana Jones of jazz?
I got you two of them right now. Okay, I'll give you two examples. And if I had a nickel for every single time I got asked about, hey, Zev, where's that Monterey 61 tape with Wes Montgomery and John Coltrane, Eric Dolphy, McCoy, Jimmy Garrison and Elvin? If I had an answer for that, and not to mention, I wouldn't have the rights to put it out anyways, but I would love to find that, and I've been looking for that for quite some time. And another recording that I've been on the hunt for is these rumored recordings that were believed to have been recorded with John Coltrane and Larry Young, the great organist and pianist, and I've been looking for those. They've been rumored for years to exist, and there's a lot of rumors that get kicked around, but we just got to keep pushing.
But you think these tapes are out there? You think both of them are there?
if we're able to find a studio record from Bill Evans from '68 that's never been out, I think anything is possible. Every day I am getting contacted by folks. I'm telling you, I think that there is a lot of stuff out there.
And you think that these people, I mean, this is what I think, I thought about with the Bill Evans story also. So these are people that are sitting on these recordings for years waiting for what? What are they waiting for, and why do they choose this moment to tell you?
I've run across instances where I've met individuals where they're afraid, oh, I have this tape, I'm not supposed to have it, I don't want to get in any trouble for it, I just want the right thing to happen with it. And some people have been holding on to tapes thinking that maybe they're going to cash in and retire on them. There are all sorts of reasons about why people wait. And also, many things for these families are very private family heirlooms. You're talking about loved ones and family members. They bring up emotional, just these sort of feelings and vibes and things that people experience. And it can be very traumatic, even as I've experienced with certain estates. And it takes time to build that trust and time. And it's a wide range. But I'm optimistic. I think we're going to make some big discoveries, Leo. We're not done yet.
I hear that we're not done, that there are these tapes out there and that there's somebody's going to find them, and it's going to be you. It might be you.
I don't know. It would be nice, and
yeah.
I want to keep doing it. Maybe we'll find that music from Buddy Bolden out there one day, huh?
But you know what I think is interesting about this? I believe in the importance of myth and popular myth and storytelling, and I have learned coming up in the jazz world that stories are so important, that the stories musicians tell one another or the fans tell one another about the stuff that you never heard, about the recording that you never got to hear, the gig that you saw that there was no tape on, or some experience that you missed, because jazz is a recorded form. We have a lot of great recordings, but the great thing about it, and we know this from having seen great concerts and great performances, is that they're kind of one-time things, right? It'll never be the same again.
Sure.
That's why these recordings are so meaningful to us, because they're capturing a thing that only happened once and really could never happen again.
Absolutely.
So I wonder if part of the excitement about unearthing these things is that it sort of validates the myth. Yes, these are stories that have been told. These are stories that have been told, and here's the artifact that reaffirms the story, the mythology.
I think the folklore,
yes.
mythology
yes.
is so important. We celebrate these legacies every day. All
yes.
you have to do is look on social media.
Yes.
We're celebrating the birthdays of these greats all the
yes.
time. It's an opportunity. People with or without the rights to the photographs put the pictures up there. And, we love doing this. We love this music. This is something that people connect with. It's really a wonderful thing to have that simpatico over music, and it's a beautiful thing.
Well, you say people, whether or not they have the rights, put the photos up there. I mean, on the one hand, of the unearthed documents, you have something like Resonance that's really doing things on the up and up and making sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and the contracts are being honored. And on the other hand, you have all kinds of YouTube clips that show up until they're pulled down or whatever it is, of somebody that had a bad copy of a video that they put up or whatever it is, and that's an enormous resource also for young musicians and music fans.
It's interesting. It's a blessing and a curse,
yes.
right? So here's an interesting one. So at Resonance, we put out the Wes Montgomery Live in Paris release, the definitive edition last year. This had been a record that had been bootlegged, had been put out about 11 or 13 odd times since 1971. And we had the original tapes. And this thing has sold and sold over the years. We put it out for the very first time last year with the proper rights being cleared, with the family of Wes Montgomery getting paid for the very first time. And we were still able to sell over 13,000 2-CD sets. And that's not even the vinyl. I think we kept, it's a lot of copies. So there are people out there that like this music when they hear about it, when they know it's out there.
Well, and to me, an initial question that is raised in these kinds of projects is, are there reasons, and this came up, for example, last year with that big Coltrane reissue, are there reasons that the album wasn't released? To what extent do we honor the desires and wishes of the artist in the moment who maybe didn't want to have it come out? Mm-hmm. And to what extent do we follow the desires and wishes of the fans or the music lovers who today maybe would find real pleasure and inspiration in hearing these things.
It's a fine line. Most importantly, I want to say, we have to protect the artist's legacies. If the recording is not good, whether it's performance or fidelity or something's really bad, at the Resonance label, that's not what we're about.
Yeah.
We don't do that. We're about doing the right thing. And, if we had a part of a recording that didn't show the artist in a positive light, I would not put it on there, nor would George.
Yeah.
And we're very particular about protecting the artist's legacies. Now, at the same time, Leo, I think sometimes you have to look back, and sometimes after years go by, you can reevaluate. And time really... over time, you can tell, like that good vintage, when something's really great. And this was a great recording.
Yeah.
This was a great recording. And, it was extraordinary. And a studio session, which is a whole other sort of musical statement versus doing a live recording. So really proud to be a part of that. And we've now done 4 releases in cooperation with the Bill Evans estate. I work with Evan Evans, Bill's son, who heads the foundation, and we've had a chance to collaborate. I get to work with the sons of some of my heroes. It's wonderful. And the same, I want to say, goes for Wes Montgomery, where we've done 6 partnerships now. The latest album, Back on Indiana Avenue, the Carol DeCamp recordings, was just released last month. And we're very excited. I would say Bill Evans and Wes Montgomery are in the bedrock of Resonance Records.
What do we make of a Bill Evans album that comes out and sells 60,000 copies when at the same time we're witnessing an enormous decline in the record business in general, and particularly jazz, which it's so hard to sell a jazz record, a contemporary jazz record. It's so hard for the new generations of jazz musicians to break through. And yet here you are telling me that you sold a previously unreleased Bill Evans album and sold 60,000 copies.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think the number one thing that we brought to this release was passion, promotion, and marketing. I wasn't going to put my baby out there, this project, without really winding up and trying to hit it out of the park. I wanted folks to hear about it. I had this job at another record company some time ago, and I remember my boss, Joyce, at the time used to say, these records come out and they escape.
Yeah.
And at a larger company, sometimes that happens because there's many projects happening you have to focus. At this label, Resonance, we put out a few projects a year, and I go to Europe, I go to Japan 2 times a year to be mentioning months before the release what's coming. We are very fine-tuned with what's happening, but we bring that passion, we bring the love. I want to stand up on top of the mountain and beat my chest and say, you need to listen to this music, it's inspiring. I want to set fire. I want to excite people. There is a reason why we're doing this. I want them to feel it from me.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think you are very public. Once somebody connects with you on some social media platform, they get a sense of what you're doing. And maybe what I'm hearing you say is part of the success that you're having is that you take it on as a personally the mantle of this work, that they know that you are behind it, they see you doing it, you're personally celebrating, as opposed to a larger label that might not have anybody personally that you can attach to the work.
I think that Bill Evans record, some other time that we did, if we hadn't really gone all out and being aggressive with, I don't know if as many people would have even heard about it. Records come out all the time, but I'm very grateful. I love engaging with people, and it's sometimes I always try to engage. I try to at least write people back. I always try to be able to speak with folks about, I make it a part of me when we're doing this. But I'm not the only one. And without George Clavin at Resonance, I wouldn't be able to do this now. Without Don Was, and also without Ken Drucker at Verve and Harry Weinger, I've been able to now.
So you're working for everybody.
And I'm also working for Corey Weeds at Cellar Live at Records. We have a new imprint called Reel to Reel, which is rescuing these archival recordings. Not each live recording or tape, or whatever I find is a good fit for one company. It depends on rights holders, on personal fans of the company executives, and I really want to find ways, like someone trying to find a home for a dog at a shelter. I want to find ways of finding people that are allowing us to get this music out.
This has got to be the sort of peak Zev moment right now, or at least in the last couple of years. It seems like, unless I've just become aware of it and I didn't know about it, it seems like more is happening with you in the business now than was happening before.
I think you're right. Although I would say 2016 was a banner year for me. Having those 26 releases in the marketplace, and it wasn't about a number. I've just been staying busy. I probably work 18 hours a day.
What's your life like? What are you doing? How is your life structured even?
Well, my life is really at this moment structured around the job, although I do strive to find some balance. And I find that recently, I've also made some personal choices in my life recently. I've lost 6 inches and about 80 or so pounds on my waist over the last few years. And I came to this point when things were really starting to rock and roll, if you will, that I needed to take care of myself even more. So my routine usually starts around early in the morning. It all depends. If I've had an all night, I try to go to bed early now. I'm trying to take care of myself more than I ever had. I wake up early, maybe 6:30 in the morning. I do about 5 miles in the morning if I'm in Los Angeles. I also try to I work out about 4 to 5 days a week where I'm doing weight training in the morning. And this is something that mentally gets me prepared. I've changed my diet. I'm looking after. And you know what's happening? I'm getting more energy, more energized. I had a point where I used to hit a wall in the afternoon. I'm keeping going, and I go for walks a lot. I do 5 to 10 miles a day at this point. I do what I can. When I'm on the road, it can be a little challenging, but the health and wellness has become such a big part, and I also try to put that out on social media because I want to inspire my friends too. I feel all these great changes that have happened, and it's been because of that. I really attribute it to that.
Do you feel that the sedentary, the weight, the unhealthy stuff, was that to some extent a function of being in the business that you were in, or was that just who you were? I mean, do you think that something about the jazz business or the record business didn't lend itself to a healthy life?
I think that in the beginning of my tenure resonance that I was working so much, and really I would just sit in that chair. I wasn't leaving, but I make it a point at least a couple of times today to go out, and I have this path that I do, and I like to spend some time outdoors. I make a list. Some folks listen to it say, oh yeah, I get those calls from Zev on his Bluetooth when the ambulances are going by and whatnot. But I've got balance, and George has been great. My clients are very understanding, but I work all the time. And if something really needs to be paid attention to, I'm on it. But this is my life. I don't have a family right now. I'm dating. I'm trying to find that balance. And I just want to be happy. And I find that this work gives me a lot of great happiness.
You seem to have a passion as much for the business as you do for the music. I don't mean to diminish your passion for the music, but only to say, as I hear you talk about it, that it's a business that was well suited to you, that you were well suited to, and you've gone out of your way in this conversation to name the people who opened the doors, to name the places that gave you the opportunity, to recognize that it's the business that opened this path up for you, and it's not specifically or only the music, but it's the business that you fell in love with.
I grew up in this business, I guess you could say. 25 years will do that to you. I've seen a lot, and I don't have all the answers. I keep falling down and making mistakes, and that's really one of the best parts too, is we are still continuing to learn. But I think I'm passionate about it. I think if we need to say something, well, you need to say it with passion if it's worth talking about. I love telling stories. I love sharing my experiences with people. And I think it's a very important part. If we have learned from previous experiences, let's discuss that sometimes. I think that comes up very often, and learning, and they're case studies, if you will. I see them like that. And I want to say, too, I don't want to use the word necessarily pigeonholed, but a lot of people do think of me as the jazz detective, but I have great ambition and aspirations to work with living artists and be involved in that creative process. And one of the nice parts is that I do get invited to recording sessions. My good friend Corey Weeds recently had me out at Rudy Van Gelder's old studio in Inglewood Cliffs for a session, and I have a chance in LA to be invited. And I love music, and I love seeing people create, and now getting a chance these years later, seeing things on all sides of the spectrum.
How do we see the difference between what existed already and making new music that didn't exist already in the world?
Depends who's presenting it, perhaps. Depends I don't know. I don't know why I'm struggling to answer that.
Well,
I treat it all the same thing with love.
Yes.
And some things catch fire and some things don't. And I use this expression. I've had to learn a lot, even with publicity and how it works. You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And you have to realize sometimes that there is only so far that you can go. I used to even be more pushy, but I realize also that if you don't ask, you don't receive, and you have to be asking those right questions.
Have you been surprised in some cases by success when you didn't necessarily think it would catch so much fire, or disappointed in some project that you thought, man, I really thought this was going to be more interesting to people, and for whatever reason? Or in general, do you think you have a pretty good sense of what a project can do?
I think I have a pretty good sense most of the time. I could really tell you in the range of how something can even perform based on all sorts of factors. Maybe it was those days years ago at Tower, seeing what was selling. And by the way, I hate to say this, but sometimes what sold 20 years ago sells at a different velocity now.
Sure.
Things are totally different. But I have this committee up in my mind. We process these things up here, and I think about that, formulating that, and I have to rely on that a lot for my job when I go in to one of my clients and they say, well, how many do you think we can sell of this? And there's never any guarantee. We make our best efforts, but it comes into play all the time, that instinct.
Yes, which is, as you say, each release is a case study, and it becomes another data point in your committee conversation.
It does. And I will say, though, that there have been some releases. You know what? I really take a lot of these. Man, I'm lucky. I get to choose ones I'm really excited about, and then I give that a passion to George or to Don Was or many of the different folks I work with. And that's met with, it's going to happen or it's not. And we go accordingly from there.
I'm so interested in this aspect of the jazz world in which it's not like there's a lack of stuff out there already. I mean, the Blue Note catalog is expansive. There's a ton of stuff out there. It would take, my father has a room in his house that has a wall covered in vinyl and another wall covered in CDs, and there is not enough time left for him to listen to all of it. He couldn't listen to it all.
I know exactly. The great pianist Marian Petrescu, in an interview with me once, talked about how his father said that there is only so much music you can listen to in one lifetime. And, think about that for a moment, and boy, when you get caught on something that you really love, then you're
going to listen to it a lot. That's the other thing. You hope that you put stuff out that people will listen to more than once, especially because we care so much about it. And we're all working so hard on the stuff that we put out. And as somebody who is releasing music today and is keeping company with a lot of people who are releasing music today, and, the conversations that we're having are like, boy, it's so hard to cut through this noise. It's so hard just to get anybody to pay attention to it. Never mind pay money for it, just pay attention to it. So, it just raises this question for me, and I don't judge it. I just wonder, do we need more stuff that was recorded by dead musicians?
I think so. I think we're continuing to learn from these musicians. They are even more important as we go on, and we realized how much they have inspired and set trends and really established styles of their own and influenced individuals, other artists. So, and I think creative people need to make music and get it out there. It is, being an artist is a whole other thing. I can't speak to it like you can, Leo. But I think there needs to be ways of getting this music out there and getting it heard. And I want to say I've just been very lucky.
Yeah.
People sometimes want to, back that up.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate that people want to discuss these projects I work on. Eternally grateful when we have something in common where we've hit a chord. That doesn't always happen. A lot of it's been luck, and a lot of it's also been, again, with great confidence and conviction, telling people, you need to listen to this.
You came through this business in a way that has allowed you to see the transition of the business, but essentially from the business as it existed at the height of the record business to what people are now lamenting as sort of the death of the record business. If a 20-year-old intern walks through your door, what would you tell? What do you tell young people in the business? What would you tell them about the future of this business? Do you think there is a future in the way that could provide a 25-year career like the one that you've had for somebody just starting today?
If you have the passion and put in the time, I think anything in this lifetime is possible with enough practice and work and being devoting yourself to it. And it's what I've done. I can't speak for other people, but I would say be true, be a music fan, try to be creative, try to learn as much as you can, understand you're going to make mistakes. I make them all the time, but just like have that hunger.
But you're optimistic in terms of there being a record business and money to change hands in this business.
People have been saying for decades and decades that the music business is dying. This is nothing new. It's going through, I'd like to think that it's going through a different phase right now in transformation. But I will say also, unfortunately, that there are individuals out there that feel that content and it should be for free. Like music should just be available to them. They shouldn't have to pay for it. And I also, and you, come from a different generation where when we, to get music, we went to a record store.
That's right.
I remember saving my allowance. So my father, I would clean the table after dinner every night. And after my 50 cents would add up, I would go to the store. My dad would take me. I bought a cassette. That's where my money always seems to have gone to, is music. But you gotta want it. You gotta. I just think anything in this lifetime is possible. My God, if I could be here talking about this, I know. Like if you work hard at something, I think also you're really lucky in this lifetime if you find something that speaks to you, that you can be passionate about. I know so many friends of mine and other folks that don't, and I remind myself every day how lucky I am.
Right.
This is where I want to be. And I also have ambitions of doing other stuff too. I'd like to take this on a larger level. I'd love to even, I don't know about a blog, have a program of my own, even curating. I want to turn people on to this art that moves me.
I understand, I think, why Europe is so important for your business and also for your image. What's happening in Japan? Why is Japan such an important engine of the business?
Oh, I'm so glad you bring it up. And I'm so passionate about Japan. It's really one of the most wonderful places on this planet. I've been very fortunate. I go there 2 times a year to meet with our friends in the media, at retail. I present my projects when I go over there. I've been doing that recently and for the last number of years. And Japan's important because they appreciate this music so much. Europe does too. And please, there are people here in the States. God bless them. We love them all. But there is something also just truly remarkable when you go to Japan and you see the way that this music and culture is embraced. It's almost like religion for people. It really is. And you go to these jazz kisas, if you will, these jazz cafes. Kisa is the proper term for it. And you go to these places and they DJ for you. They play you their favorite records. It's about we want to share. But Japan is so inspiring because there is also still a great physical CD marketplace there. The CD is not dead, folks. Not yet. And we are still, folks buy it in this medium over there. And there is brick and mortar retail. I believe we have somewhere around 60 odd Tower record stores. We have about 70 disc union locations, tons of independent retail. And when you go over there, it's like you got in a time machine. You went back 20 years ago. I'm going to the Tower Records corporate office in South Tokyo to meet with them and present my releases. I think it's so exciting. And I love the culture. I love the food. I've made so many friends.
Why haven't they made the transition to streaming like we have here?
Well, they're making it's happening. People are streaming, but I think that folks in that part of the world still really believe in physical and the artwork and the presentation and the detail and what goes into it.
Do you think there's any future that you see in China for the music? Is it a totally different thing we don't know yet? I mean, have you looked into it?
It's a different territory. We sell in that part of the world too, absolutely. There is even a Blue Note Club, I believe, in Shanghai, if I'm not mistaken. And No, we have fans of this music in all different parts of the world. It's interesting when you go to certain parts of the world, it may not be a record store that you buy your music at. It could be your local hi-fi,
Sure.
Speaker, your stereo system dealer, and you'll find that in parts of the Middle East and Southeast Asia. It's where you go. And, but it's really, at the same time now, a global marketplace at the same time. But it's it's amazing. I'm overwhelmed by it sometimes. And just like when I think about all these different layers and things that need to happen, I love it.
Did you think that you would be this kind of person in the business when you started? Did you hope you would? Does this have anything to do with what you imagined for yourself, what you do today?
I just wanted to be in the business. I wanted longevity. I think maybe in the back, I don't know. I never even could have grasped that I would have been a record producer 25 years ago. I never thought I would get that chance. And no, it's surprising to even me. I don't even know where this road is taking me yet. It's been very exciting, and it's...
You don't seem particularly shy about being in the business. What I think is interesting talking to you is that there are plenty of people who are career record people, who have a life in marketing or a life in distribution or whatever it is, but you never hear who they are. You never know who they are. And then you've got the sort of the big names. You've got either the kind of big shot producers of the 70s and 80s who were, the Tommy LaPumas and the, who we all know about.
Sure.
Or even the Michael Cascunas, who I think kind of toe the line a little bit, and that's the model that an image that that we talked about already, and a model that we talked about already. But you seem a little bit like an unusual character in the sense that you obviously have deep affinity and admiration for the business and the people in the business, and you're also willing to and prepared to and comfortable being a kind of public face of that business as well, and allowing the world to see you and know you.
Right now, I found a place for me right now. We'll see if it's there next week.
Yeah, right.
I mean, this business can eat people up and spit them out. Things change all the time, and I just think I want to, live in the moment here. I'm really trying to. But the promise of the new day is real, man, what we are finding. I have that reason to leap out of bed in the morning right now, and it's great.
Zev Feldman, thank you for leaping out of bed today and coming here to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Leo, thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah,
thanks
great.
again.
Yeah, man. There he was, my friends, Zev Feldman, laying it out, putting it down, letting us know where the tapes are buried, how you find it, who you talk to, what comes next. I'll be back again soon with another deep dive. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.